Thank you very much, Enrique. I'm so pleased to be here, and I thank all of you for coming today. I plan on giving you a little taste of what it might be like to enroll in our 4 sessions webinar, and certainly because I have become a little more non-traditional in the way that I approach my teaching. I like to start out by giving a couple of minutes of thanks to my ancestors. Sometimes I show pictures. This time I'm not doing that. I probably will do it for the regular webinar, but I like to acknowledge those people that went before me that have made me who I am and that have prepared a way for me to carry on their legacy. Um, I have both Japanese ancestry as well as European ancestry. And so I've always been grateful to be able to look around the whole world for evidence of where my ancestors have been. And I'm so grateful to them. In particular, my mother, may she rest in peace, was really the neighborhood social worker. And so, in an informal way, not paid, she worried and reached out to neighbors all the time to make sure that everyone in our neighborhood was doing okay. And I really love that legacy that she left me. And so to all of you, I extend that well wish from my mother, Peggy Hanna, and hope that you are all well and able to benefit from this today. So thank you again, Enrique. And I'm going to put up a PowerPoint that is a sample. It has slides from our main presentation. And I put this in Spanish just to help everyone feel comfortable. My mother would do something like that, even though I'm not very fluent. My mother also sang, and she loved singing. And I do a little singing, but not in any kind of high quality way. But I do want to give you a little sample of what I'm calling here coming full circle. So when I use the phrase coming full circle with chanting, what I mean by that is in ancient times and with cultures around the world, various groups engage in chanting. Sometimes it's Buddhist, that's probably the most common, but certainly in the other Asian countries where I've been, there are various forms of chanting. What I find very interesting is this YouTube that I'm going to play for you, is of Tina Turner, who is a famous rock star. Now she's passed on, but during her life, she had a journey that took her from gospel singing in churches to becoming a rock star to then able to recover from traumas of domestic violence. And so coming full circle, I mean it in 2 ways. One is that an ancient practice has helped a modern day person to heal. And then the other way that we're coming full circle is that in many ways, then what has happened to you, what has happened to her, has happened to you in your own individual ways. And so after I play her chanting, then I am going to suggest that you do a little contemplating over your own journey. So she's going to chant these words, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and this both in Spanish and in English speaks to what those words mean. So I'll give you a minute to read those. And then I'm going to let you just experience what something like that feels like. It's very ancient, but here we have a modern day experience with it.
Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. Yo Renge Kyo, Nam-myoho 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 Renge Kyo. Renge Kyo, Nam-myoho 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 Renge Kyo. Yo Renge Kyo. Hope and Pondai Ni. Ni Jin Sei Sang Ju Sam Ma Yan Ju Ni Ki Go Charis Ju Bu Ji Ye Jan Jan Maria Go Che Ma Nang Ge Nan Yu Yin Sa Ju Ma Na Ka Ji Bu Yo Bu No Ji Jo Wei Cha Ga Bu So Zin Ga Man Da Ka Mu Ju Jo Bu Zin Yo Jo Bu Mo Yo Do Ho Myo Jo Jin Mo Jo Bu Man Jo Ju Jin Jan Mi So Wu Ho Sui Ki Shou Sa Sui Shou Rang Ge.
When she makes that gong sound, just sort of resonates in the air. And so not only is there engagement, with hearing, but also sight. And then in addition to the sight, many people will just have their own sort of reverberations in their bodies. And so now, are you all seeing my screen now? Are you all seeing my presentation?
Yes, perfect. Go ahead.
Great. So coming full circle then, by the end of our 4 sessions, we will have constructed our own chants. We will have helped our clients, we'll learn how to help our clients construct individualized experiences that work for them. And I've had a range of clients do a range of things. One person, when she had her music player on and she's exercising, then she made sure that there were songs on that music player that had phrases that she could repeat. And then once she finished her exercise session, she could continue to repeat some of those phrases out of those songs that helped her to feel powerful and confident. So again, there's many kinds of ways that we can help our clients do this. And so coming full circle, you'll have more of this when we go through our different sessions. And we're going to be talking some about the history of mental health, but right now, in this session, I'd be interested in having you just go into your mind related to your own personal history. And as you think through and review your history and perhaps the influence of your ancestors, I'd like you to stop at whatever sort of point is a point in your earlier life that you think really motivated you to become a professional clinician, whether it's psychotherapy or family therapy or social work or whatever is the mode of care that is your profession now, was there a point in time, maybe many, but what do you remember as one of the early points in time when you might have then begun to have this desire to adopt this as a profession? And sometimes, like with my social worker mother, who is just a neighborhood friend to everyone, I wasn't thinking then, I'm going to become like mom. But what I was doing was watching her, and I took from her various elements of my own progression that have led me then. And at some point, I did say, wow, you know, I'm bringing my mother with me now. And the day that she and I rescued a victim of domestic violence, I'm bringing my mother with me. You know, the day that she went down the street to the neighbor's house after they lost a family member to death, I'm bringing my mother with me. So whatever it is for you, I'd like you to kind of hang on to that moment today while we go through many other, you know, kinds of things. But the reason I do that is because I think that that represents for our work here, it represents a sacred moment. And then how many people are so lucky to have you as a practitioner, and what good have you done in the world that may have been, that may, you know, where the sacred moment might have prepared you now to be in the place where you are to help. So I honor each of those for you. And if we were in another world, in another, you know, kind of exercise, I might give you a few minutes even to journal something like that and to reflect on it, you know, more later. And certainly you could do that after this hour is up. So, so we will review some things in mental health. Mostly, part of that session one will be to help you see where you fit in. So just like this sacred moment, there may be other points in time that give you a sense of where you fit now in the larger world of mental health treatment and mental health service. And in the field of family therapy and in the practice of family therapy.
I lost you. I don't hear you, Suzanne. Your internet went down. Can you talk? I cannot hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There you now better.
Can you, oh, it says, I have a little sign that says my internet connection is unstable, but then it went away.
Yeah, just continue and move on, please, so we have enough time.
Okay, so I'm not going to obviously review the areas of our family therapy models and what they cover and how they approach things. We're only going to spend a few minutes on that in the regular webinar. But what I will do is show you where I ran up into a shortage of knowledge and skill when I only had my family therapy skills and knowledge. And so I have a little question that I'm posing. Why do some need treatment and others do not when they've had trauma? And how do MFT models address this? 20 years ago, I could not answer either of those questions. It was in the early part of our 21st century, the United States government was spending a lot of money to help our veterans coming back from war with their trauma. And some of them needed treatment and some of them did not. And so what's the difference? What makes the difference? Can family therapy give me an answer? At that time, I had to say, no, I did not have an answer from family therapy models. But research on the brain was coming out 20 years ago in ways that helped me to answer those questions. So what you have here in this slide is what I call biological empathy, where we grasp biosocial process at different realms of interaction. So certainly our interaction with our body, when we heard Tina Turner and it resonated in our ear and we were aware of that resonance, that's our body, speaking to us. Then there's parent-child, parent-baby attachment. Larger, if a person is an only child, then they may have friends or cousins who help them with their identity formation. So siblings, extended family, friends at this interactional level. Then socially, a little broader, our peers, whether it's school, in the neighborhood, many opportunities outside the family. Then getting to society, we have a larger cultural sort of influence and ways in which we interact with the larger world. It might be through racism. It might be through sexism. It might also be through some sort of support groups, our own professional work, our own educational work, many ways that we have. And then at the highest level is a sense of the supernatural, whether it's God, whether it's natural forces, whether it's the universe. Then we have a way of positioning ourselves. I'll mention an example of that with a man who was an atheist in a few more slides. So these are levels of interaction. And the brain is a social organ. That was one of the most important things I learned in the early neuroscience research. Everyone knows that the brain is a social organ. And so this interplay of all of these interactional levels, even though in family therapy, we often talk about ecosystemic. I apologize, it might be a little hard to translate, but sort of the ecological as well as the systemic. But that was what then led me to look at a larger picture when I tried to understand, why do some people need treatment and other people do not? So similar diagram shows the cylinder in the middle there. And what this is the body's interplay with each of these levels. So not just me interacting through conversation or dialogue or relationship, but my body actually interacting. So the social brain then is active through each of these and interacts with each of these. Now we have on one side then some examples of how the body might end up then registering interaction at any of these levels. There might be activation, there might be criticism. There's a lot of research on criticism and humiliation now, and the brain waves that happen during the process that we would call criticism, humiliation, racism, or shame. And so we will definitely be looking at that for a way to assess, why do some people need treatment and others do not? These levels, they might represent challenges. They also might represent safety. And if each of these levels represent a form of safety for people, then they may have enough safety to provide a buffer for the trauma that they bring back from war, for instance. Or now that we generalize, there's so many traumas from so many different, parts of living that then we might have a trauma at one level here, but perhaps safety at some other levels. And those, or we might have a trauma down at the level of the body, but safety at some of these other levels. And so this can be sort of a way to make an equation. How many safe places and how many stressful places do we have along this continuum? Does our body have enough places to still be safe or not? And I'm obviously leaving out the idea that some traumas are more severe than others. They're more intense. They may involve, again, the body. They might involve 3 or 4 of these. And I am leaving some of that out right now. But I'm actually, in our webinar, I'm going to make some dramatic suggestions. And one is that the intensity and the severity isn't always about the body. For instance, if someone must have an amputated leg, that's very severe. Or a spinal cord injury, that's tremendously severe. However, I will maintain if there are still enough safe places, then the person's overall nervous system will not be affected as deeply. Yes, still deep, but not as deeply. And then where we come in is we can look at these different levels of potential intervention and create wonderful treatment plans that honor the complexity of the world that we live in, as well as the complexity of what people feel. Okay, so then in our session 2, where we talk more about the neuroscience narratives of survival, then we are going to go on to some discussion of brain parts. Dr. Bruce Perry divides the brain into four sections. And some of you might be familiar with his work with severe children. I now use his model with adults all the time. And so even though his main body of work is with severely abused children, after reading some of his case examples and looking at the severity of abuse, and then how honoring these 4 different sections of the brain can help even the most severely abused children and adults from their woundedness. And I just became, frankly, mesmerized by his work with severely abused children. So in our webinar, in our series, we will deconstruct one of his case studies minute by minute and piece by piece so that you can see why these different elements are so important, and then how you can make a manageable treatment plan, even though we're looking at 4 different parts of the brain. And again, right now, it may seem complicated, but I have a little question down here as well. So I'm just posing questions along the way. What brain region has the most neurons? It'll totally surprise you, and I'm not going to tell you. You have to sign up for our series in order to answer that question, but there's so many surprises in the brain. I really love what I've learned from all of these different surprises. Okay, and so this is an example of something that we also will go through in detail. And essentially, if we wanted to look at that chanting experience that we all just had, it would come up here in the first line under brainstem. And even though there might be elements that you would guess, come along in the different other rows, it really starts out brainstem, that ringing in the ears, these somata sensory activities, repetition. Repetition is so important. Repetition is so important. if I wanted to role model, see, I would repeat everything 4 times for you. But it's fascinating how much our brain stems, not just little children, but those of us that are looking for a way to calm our nervous system, how important repetition can be in order to make that happen. Okay, so then another part of the contribution to the brain has to do with everything sort of below the neck. Now, Resmaa Menakem, who we will speak about in our series, calls the vagus nerve the soul nerve. And that's because it's so tied into our own nervous system regulation. It transmits information from the rest of our body. And you can see that below the diaphragm, look at all of our organs below the diaphragm, below breathing, that the vagus nerve tracks. And so when a person has a traumatic experience, that vagus nerve is going to both carry information to these organs, but also bring information back up from those organs. And what that does is create a web of neurons that are all fired off. Now, that fire off at the same time. So let's say that I have an auto accident. And I have to say, with some humor here, when I've been in Europe, some of the Autobahns that I've driven on have been like really scary for me. So I always hope that I won't have an accident when I'm on one of the European highways. All of you have experience, and I admire you greatly that you're able to navigate those. Nevertheless, if I were to have an accident, it would be a multisensory experience. And so sort of like the opposite of our chanting, it would be a multisensory overload in many ways. And what happens then is all of these neurons that fire off, are tied to different parts of our bodies and to different organs. And I have to say that in all my years now, 20 years of working with trauma.
Ya, es que ahora me quito.
Oh, if you could mute your mic, that would be good. Thank you for muting your.
Vamos a silenciar los micrófonos, por favor. Gracias.
In
Go ahead.
Spanish, thank you. Thank
Yes,
you.
go ahead.
So what's interesting is I've never met a person who's had significant trauma who has not had stomach problems. But earlier in my practice, I would have never asked. I would have never thought to ask about their stomach, they can't report on conscious elements of the liver, but we can become aware of what those elements in the liver are, which we'll talk about, in our series. So a lot of this is still unconscious to people, but not the stomach. And so I'm just amazed at how specific the stomach seems to be to so many different trauma experiences. And consequently then, if we're going to have biological empathy, then we should also, be knowing that this person may be having all of these different sort of experiences within their body. And then how can we, co-regulate is the term. How can we take our own sense of peace and quiet and then be able to transfer that sense of peace and quiet to the other person? We call that co-regulation. Now, with babies, we may pat a baby. It may come a lot from physical. There are very appropriate physical mechanisms that can be done. I had a client who had a spasm in his shoulder, and after 2 or 3 other sort of exercises with meditation and some different things, he still had this spasm. So I just asked permission to put my hand on that part of his shoulder. And that's all I did. I just put my hand there and then just asked him to do some more breathing and let him breathe and feel his shoulder while I have my hand on it. So after a few minutes of just quiet, calm breathing, then the spasm went away. I don't know why. The other things that I usually would do, breathing, meditations, different sort of, somatic, exercises, none of them worked, but that did. And so we always have people who are highly individual. And in his case, the only reason he agreed to come to therapy was because I asked his parents to bring him and promise him that he would not be asked to speak if he wanted to just sit and observe while the 3 of us spoke. He was suicidal. I was not going to let him sit at home while they come in and tell me how worried they are about him. So he agreed to come, and he sat for about a half hour while the 3 of us spoke. And then we couldn't get him to stop talking. He wanted me to know his story after that. So highly individual, these nervous systems. And so I played to what I knew was some security they had with his parents, but total insecurity with who I am or what I might be. After that, he was fine with individual sessions. And so then we went, on our way. But it was him who then I put my hand on his shoulder after a few other things didn't seem to be helping. And sometimes I ask a person to put their own hand, and that's a certain kind of co-regulation as well. But we'll go on now to speaking about healthy nervous system. Certainly Peter Levine's work and some other folks now use, I like his word, pendulation. I really like his word, and maybe because I've had the Peter Levine training, then I'm partial to that, to that choice of words. But it is what our nervous system does. We activate and then we deactivate. We breathe and then we inhale and then we exhale. And so this is a healthy nervous system. The unhealthy nervous system is if we're stuck and our bodies cannot be replenished properly. And so what can be pendulation when you have someone who's experienced trauma and has a lot of triggers? So in the slide here, rituals, joy, rhythm. So rhythm, just as we spoke with the brain, with the brain stem, needs rhythm. We'll talk about how to develop that rhythm. If you think about it, Tina Turner had rhythm, not just as a rock star, but in her chanting also, there was a rhythm to that. Very important for co-regulation, and even more important when it can happen in a group or with another person, then the co-regulation does come about from being with other people. Joy. Who ever heard about joy as being part of a trauma treatment plan? Well, in the old days, there wasn't a lot of room in traditional psychotherapy for joy because we were mostly problem-centered and not thinking a lot about how important joy was or what the neurotransmitters and the hormones in the body, how those relate to joy or then to ritual. So very important part then of incorporating neuroscience is to be able to do this alternating between the focus on the trauma and relief from the focus, relief from the trauma focus, excuse me. And going back and forth would have not happened in traditional psychotherapy in the old days, or even in my practice of family therapy. I was much more about making interactions happen at the time in the session. And so there was an intensity to that. And that now has been modulated in my own practice, where we will take things in certain, sort of steps, making sure that there's space in between. And it's not just about space to calm down. Space for joy is a certain sort of art to work into an overall session. Okay, so the other part of what neuroscience is starting to develop narratives about is this concept of moral injury. And it's written in big letters because I consider it to be, extremely important, but we are only just beginning to understand it. And so in the military, this phrase was used for people coming away from war who had had some sort of either injury to their conscience or injury to their sense of justice. And so it can be anything from, the guilt that comes from having killed a person when you don't believe that killing is a good thing to do. And so when it goes against a person's conscience, that's a moral injury. If a commanding officer is abusive in some way, or asks people to do something that is illegal or is against the rules, that's a moral injury when you have hierarchy dictating a conflict, with rules, or a betrayal, a violation of rules. Then that can be, without any injury to the body, it can be a tremendous burden for those military people that are below. So any betrayal. Nowadays, I think that racism, sexism, and classism are also betrayals of trust and power, that we depend on our society to keep everyone safe. We depend on our government, to provide safety, to provide certain rights to all people. And so because of that, then when that is not accomplished, if police officers, for instance, commit a crime with someone, I'm not singling them out. There's other folks in the hierarchy who can also then betray trust, and other folks that are not even, for instance, in the military or in government. Now, I also consider incest to be a moral injury, because that also, there's a hierarchy and there's a betrayal that's initiated from the hierarchy. So you might think that I'm thinking that every type of trauma or every type of abuse has attached to it a moral injury. It doesn't. In the military, what they're finding is there are certain people who understand what their duty is, and they will not have a crisis of conscience if they have to kill someone, even though they would not do it in a civilian, in a civilian area. However, what's happening now in the research is, if a person has PTSD and they score high on a moral injury survey. Both of those predict suicide much more than PTSD alone. And that's why I have this in big letters, because there is a difference between PTSD and moral injury. In my book, I have some examples of some surveys that the military are using now to judge whether or not a person does have, a higher level of moral injury. But it was the rate of suicide that sent me thinking really seriously about how to not just be satisfied with, PTSD treatment, even when people can be making progress. I read some interviews of people who had both PTSD and moral injury. And even when they were starting to get some relief from their PTSD, they were still tormented in ways that treatment had not been able to address. So it is part of our time together in our workshop, because I just see it as tremendously important to really making a difference with complicated cases. And in case you're not aware, I really focus on complicated cases. I had a private practice for a number of years. Many of those cases were not complicated. And when I began to have, people who had PTSD, but we might not have had the language for it, then I began to see that my own expertise was limited, and that I needed to broaden out and really take a look at what makes these cases complicated and how can we, address them. So again, as the next step in our pendulation, going from activation to inactivation, I use this slide because it gives examples of what you can do in a very quick way to have pendulation happen. As an example, with the same case that I was telling you about where I touched his shoulder, he called one day feeling very suicidal. I was out of town. And his parents were kept, they were aware, and they didn't know what to do either. And so because he really likes superheroes, I asked him, what superhero could be the most helpful right now if you became that person? And he listed the superhero that has some kind of disorder where he's on the spectrum and he can change personalities. There was an American streaming show about this. It's called Moon Knight, is the superhero. So we rehearsed what he could do as Moon Knight that would help him through these next hours. He was at work, and get him over that hump. And he got really animated. He really settled down. He could breathe again. And he had chosen that, and it just clicked, well for him. And then after that, we looked at all kinds of favorites. So you see on the list here, what is your favorite blank? And you can fill that in. What's your favorite music? What's your favorite television show? Who is your favorite person? Just focusing on favorites can really bring the nervous system down and lead to some very productive activities. So this chart, we go over in more detail. At the same time then, Resmaa Menakem, who I mentioned a few slides ago, he gets people to a certain point where then they have all of this anxiety, and again, looking for pendulation, then he has a whole list of things that can help with discharge and pendulation. And see, it's co-regulation. when we are sort of the personal trainer. After doing exercises in the gym with a personal trainer, I've decided we all should adopt a role as the personal trainer of the nervous system. So I sometimes will say that to my clients who like to go work out in the gym. But these are examples then from Resma Menachem, and they also represent then a way to help people swing. Okay. The next group of narratives has to do with grief. And again, if we went back to the moral injury slide, I'm beginning to see signs that that moral injury category includes a sense of grief that we often overlook. And so the dehumanization of loss can come from so many different types of losses. In our series, I really want to acquaint you with the full range of losses. I had a client who had a dog when she was a girl. Her father came out on the porch, and when the dog was barking to his irritation, to the father's irritation, he went and got his gun and shot the dog in front of all the children. Now, I am a dog lover, and it was like, traumatic just for me to hear that story. However, had I had better training at that time, obviously, I was talking about dogs in the session in a very haphazard way when this client burst into sobs. That's how I found out her story. So I didn't know that I had touched a nerve. It was a very casual story. And as soon as I realized I had touched that nerve, oh, how I wish that I had had the skills then that I have today, because clearly she deserved better help. And I love to tell stories about when I failed, because I really use them as ways in which I can do better. And then all of us can do better when we're willing to be vulnerable and look at, times when we wished we could have done better. So you'll see here a number of different ones. And actually, there's not even a loss of a pet on here. So as you can tell, the range of losses can be so great. Loss of a childhood, because of sexual assault, loss of a child, loss of body, from amputation or from war, loss just of friendship. There's amazing, surprising ways that sometimes what we would see as small things can be losses that need to be honored. Michael White, the narrative family therapist, has some very nice work about how, to deal with losses. And we'll go over some of that as well. Okay, so now the ancient wisdom, and I'm going to just make sure that we're coming up on time here. Here's the difference between ancient and modern in one way. The ancient and more indigenous peoples have an immense sense of gratitude, generosity, and abundance. And while I might sit in my comfortable house with central air conditioning or central heating or a comfortable bed to sleep in, they have way more gratitude, generosity, and abundance with much less of the modern comforts that I enjoy. And they are tied to the land in some very sacred ways. And they tend always, to be tribal or collective. Whereas then, in our modern world, and forgive me, a lot of this is American rooted. So if you think that I should change this to being more Eurocentric, please let me know. But as an example, we can go ahead and let me be the American, example of of what can become excess and also non-therapeutic and certainly dysregulating. Competition is dysregulating. Worrying about quantity is dysregulating. Consumerism, that we should have everything, and uniformity in our agriculture, that we should have hundreds of acres of the same plant just because it's efficient. And so we have a very individualistic culture in America. And to be honest, you in Europe have a much more collectivist sense. You might not consider yourself to be indigenous or, tribal in the way that we'll talk about it. But you far and away, from all of the experiences that I've had visiting Europe, I just always am so grateful for your example at living, different lives in that way. There's a journalist who talks about intoxicating unity. It comes from his study being with the military for 30 years. He was embedded as a journalist. He said that there's this philosophy that they have. I may hate you, but I would die for you. And that's a military sense. Now, parents who are frustrated with their kids might say the same thing. And so what do we do with that? Well, our more collectivist folks have a sense of surviving as a group and how important that is. In the military, danger, urgency, and adversity, they bring this sense of unity. And so when the American veterans come home, they become depressed. So the question to be answered in our series is, how can we help veterans develop a sense of urgent purpose after they return? That's the key here, a sense of urgent purpose when it's no longer life and death. Just as a final note, looking at the contrast between different cultures, different, communities. This is a Native American medicine wheel. There's many versions of this among all of our American Native tribes, but this is just one example of a medicine wheel where they look at, obviously, the seasons, going from one season to another, going from one direction to another, east, south, west, north, what those might symbolize as opportunities or as tasks that need to be performed. The cyclical nature of life is something that I was not exposed to, even though I was raised in quite a multicultural environment with Native American people in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in the USA. So I'm saying, even as a child in a multicultural community, I really didn't learn about medicine wheels until I was much older. And so a little bit where we started, but in a different way. This is the picture of our internal brain. And there's more that we could go into, but this is where we get our hormones, our neurotransmitters, all kinds of chemical communicators that rush through the body all the time. We as therapists have every opportunity, by looking at brain science, our own professional training and wisdom, and putting those together, we can help our clients actually selectively secrete their own drugstore and their own brain chemistry. We have that opportunity. I did not have that kind of skill for many years, but it's my wish and desire, for us all to realize how powerful we can be and how successful we can be in helping people not only find relief, but helping them really thrive and become the contributing people that they have, that they dream about. I don't know if this one will work or not, but and if we are out of time, then this one's a little longer. It's about 4 minutes. And so I don't want to impose on people's time if I'm showing that we're right up at the top of the hour.
Yes, yes, we can share these links with the participants, and I will share the recording once it's edited with the participants.
Okay, so are you saying you'll find a way to just share this link separately?
Yeah, if you'll pass it to me, I will, for sure.
Okay, all right. I'll be happy to do that. And it's just to let you know, it's a group of people singing the song, but given what we've talked about already, then as you watch it, you might think about what happens to your own body and what sensations flow through your own body as you watch that, as you watch this YouTube, and that'll give you also some ideas about how thrilling it is to be a practitioner at this time, and how we are able to help our clients feel a sense of being thrilled again.
You want to try?
Okay, here we go. Are we ready?
Thank
Well,
you very
So
much.
thank you for letting me share that.
No, it was amazing. Yes. Well, thank you, everybody. I will send a recording to you. Les mandaré la grabación cuando esté editada con la traducción. Y muchas gracias.
And thank you so much for having joined. And if you would like to take part in this training, you are most than welcome, and see you. Thanks to our translator. It's my pleasure. And thank you all. Thank you.